The unexpected sound. The great council chamber of the Xorith Dominion was filled with the low hum of alien voices. Tall banners of every starfaring race hung from the walls, and at the center stood a round table where leaders gathered. Today, the topic was not war, not peace, not trade. It was something far stranger: humanity. For months, reports had reached the council about the strange way humans organize their armies. Countless titles, strange patches on their uniforms, and a ranking system that seemed endless. Private, corporal, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, major, colonel, general. It confused the alien leaders, who were used to simpler structures where one commander gave orders and the rest obeyed. A tall insectoid delegate clicked his mandibles in mockery. Humans are obsessed with labels, he hissed. They need a rank for every step, every breath. They cannot fight without their precious titles. A ripple of laughter spread through the chamber. Another alien, with scales shining in the light. Added, I heard they even listen to their healers. Imagine that. And battlefield commanded by a doctor instead of a warrior. The council erupted into harsh, echoing laughter. To them, it was absurd. The thought that a medic, or doc, as the humans called them, could hold authority over soldiers seemed like the funniest joke in the galaxy. But in one shadowy corner of the chamber, a young alien captain came out. He had seen something the others had not. His scales twitched as he remembered a sound he would never forget. It had been deep in the ruins of a burned-out colony world, during the war against the Kreth. His unit had fought side by side with human marines, and when their commander was killed, chaos should have followed, orders should have broken down, soldiers should have scattered. But instead, the humans did something strange. They turned to their medic. He remembered it clearly. The sharp whistle of plasma fire cutting through the air, the smoke rising, the screams of wounded soldiers. And then, amid all that chaos, came the unexpected sound. Not the booming voice of a general, not the angry shout of a captain, but a calm, steady voice, quiet yet sharp enough to cut through the storm. Hold the line. 2 squads, flank left. You, cover fire on that ridge. Move the wounded behind me. Now, the alien captain had frozen in shock. The one giving orders was not the highest-ranked officer. He was not even holding a heavy weapon. He was just a human in simple armor, with a red cross painted on his shoulder. A medic. And yet, the soldiers obeyed. Not reluctantly, not with hesitation, but instantly, as if every word carried the weight of command. The alien captain remembered the sound of boots striking the ground, of rifles charging, of men and women moving with precision. The battlefield had turned in seconds, and where there should have been panic, there was only order. He had turned to one of the human soldiers, whispering in disbelief, "Why do you follow me? He is not your commander." The soldier had answered with a look of iron in his eyes. "He's Doc. That's enough." Now in the council chamber, as the laughter of the alien leaders echoed, that memory haunted him. The sound of that steady human voice still rang in his ears. He wanted to speak, to warn them, but his throat tightened. He had seen what happened when Doc took control of a battlefield, and it was no joke. The insectoid delegate slammed a claw against the table. Their system is foolishness. How can an army function with so many voices, too many ranks, too much noise? They are weak. The young alien captain's claws dug into the edge of his seat. Weak. He remembered the Kreth heavy armor collapsing under human grenades. He remembered the way Doc had pulled a bleeding soldier from the dirt, patched his wounds in seconds, then sent him back into the fight. He remembered soldiers shouting "Doc," as if it were a battle cry. The sound was not weakness. It was something else, something terrifying. The chamber quieted when a messenger entered, holding a glowing data slate. He bowed low and placed it before the council leader. Latest reports from the frontier, honored ones. The leader activated it, and the holo display flickered to life. A battlefield appeared, scared and broken. Smoke rose in the background. Alien war machines lay destroyed, and human soldiers marched forward in perfect formation. At the center of the image stood a figure, helmet dented, armor scratched, carrying only a small rifle and a medic's pack. He was pointing forward, and entire companies of human troops were moving at his command. The chamber fell into silence. The council leader frowned. "Who is this commander? His insignia is low. He is no general." The messenger hesitated. His voice trembled as he answered. "They call him Doc." The word hung in the air like thunder. The young alien captain closed his eyes. He knew that sound all too well, the calm, steady voice of a man who should not have had power, yet commanded more than any rank could grant. And as the council stared at the hologram, unease began to creep into their laughter. Because for the first time, they understood. If even a medic could command humanity's warriors, then perhaps humans were far more dangerous than they had believed. The unexpected sound of his voice still echoed, waiting to return in the next battle. The battlefield of Vera 9 still smoldered when the alien observers landed. Broken tanks lay scattered like children's toys, black smoke rising from twisted metal. Craters dotted the ground where artillery had torn the earth apart. And yet, through the destruction, a strange order could be seen. Human soldiers moved in careful patterns, sweeping sectors, securing survivors, tending to the wounded. At the center of it all stood a man who did not look like a commander. His armor was dented, his helmet scratched, and across his shoulder was the red cross of a field medic. He carried a pack of medical tools heavier than his rifle. His hands were steady, even though the battlefield around him smelled of blood and fire. The alien observers, 3 generals from different species, watched from a safe ridge. They whispered among themselves, confusion written across their faces. "That one," said General Kor, a scaled reptilian with sharp golden eyes, "is giving orders. But he has no markings of authority. No general's insignia. Not even a captain's." Another, General Theris of the insectoid rack, clicked his mandibles in disbelief. "Humans are strange. Soldiers bow their heads when he speaks, yet he is not their leader. I do not understand." The third, General Villarn of the Avrix, tilted his feathered head. His voice was softer, more cautious. "Perhaps authority is not always worn. Perhaps it is earned." Below them, the man called Doc knelt beside a wounded Marine, checking his pulse. His voice was calm, firm, carrying across the noise of machines and groaning engines. "You'll make it," he said. "Tourniquet, tight. Morphine, half dose. Now move him to the evac zone. You, yes, you with the rifle. Cover that ridge. We're not done here yet." The soldiers obeyed instantly. No hesitation, no questions. Orders flowed from him as naturally as water down a stream. And what stunned the aliens most was not that the soldiers followed. It was how they followed. With absolute trust. With eyes that burned with loyalty. General Kor growled low in his throat. "Unnatural. Armies need rank. A soldier obeys because of the chain of command. This is chaos." But Villarn shook his head slowly. "No, Kor. This is not chaos. Look closer. Every man and woman moves with precision. They fight as if guided by one mind. But that mind belongs to a medic." Kor spat in disgust. Absurd. Down below, Doc rose to his feet, scanning the horizon. His gaze was sharp, his posture calm, yet there was no arrogance in his stance. He was not a man who demanded authority. He carried it without asking. As the observers continued to watch, a human officer approached Doc. His armor bore the insignia of a captain, clearly higher in rank. By council law, by every alien military structure, that captain should have been the one in charge. But the captain's voice carried no authority. Instead, he spoke like a man seeking guidance. "Doc," he said, "enemy scouts are regrouping on the North Ridge. How do you want to handle it?" The alien stiffened. "How do you want to handle it?" The question alone broke every rule they knew. The captain should have given orders, not asked them. Doc answered simply, without hesitation. Set up mortars at Grid 9. Suppress the ridge before they gather strength. Pull 2nd platoon back to cover the AVAC. And tell your sniper team to shift east. They'll try a flank. The captain nodded. Understood. He turned and shouted the orders to his men. The alien general stared, speechless. Corp's voice crackled with disbelief. The officer obeys him. A captain obeys a medic. There shook his insectoid head. No, this cannot be right. It breaks the very structure of the world. It insults logic. But Villar, the feathered general, leaned forward with quiet intensity. His feathers rustled as he whispered. No, it does not break the world. It reshapes it. The observers continued to watch as the humans executed the orders flawlessly. Mortars thundered, suppressing the ridge. The evac zone remained secure. The sniper team shifted positions and cut down advancing scouts before they even reached the flank. The battle, which had seemed on the edge of disaster, was now under control. Doc returned to his work, kneeling once more beside the wounded, speaking calm words as he stitched, bandaged, and gave orders all at once. His hands worked like those of a healer, but his voice guided like a commander. The alien generals could no longer deny what they saw. This man, this medic, commanded an entire battlefield without rank, without title, without the symbols of power. Their wrists trembled with unease. If even their healers can lead armies, then what monsters are their generals? Villarn's voice was grave. Perhaps we mocked the wrong people. Perhaps the humans hide their strength not in their ranks, but in their bonds. Core snarled. Nonsense. Loyalty must be chained, disciplined. This loyalty is dangerous. It is too strong. Soldiers should not worship one man. And yet, even as he spoke, he knew the truth. He could see it in the soldiers' eyes, in the way they moved when Doc spoke. This was no worship. This was respect forged in fire. Respect that no insignia could command, and no chain of command could break. As the observers prepared to leave, the unexpected sound returned once more. Doc's voice, calm but unyielding, cutting through the canvas like a blade. Hold steady. You will die tonight. Not only watch, not one. The aliens exchanged glances. That voice, so steady in the storm, carried more weight than any general's shout. It was the sound of a leader who asked for more, but who never followed to the end of the galaxy. And for the first time, the alien generals felt something they had not expected to feel in the presence of a mere human medic. Fear. The skies above Veronine burned red as night fell. Plasma fire streaked across the horizon. Ships rumbled in the clouds, and the earth trembled with the weight of marching machines. For the alien observers, the war should have been simple. Numbers, strategy, and ranks decided everything. But here, as the battle spread like wildfire, nothing was simple anymore. Because wherever the humans stood, one voice guided them. That voice did not shout like generals. It did not bark commands like surgeons. It spoke steady, calm, and sure, carrying strength without needing volume. It was the voice of Doc. The alien generals had returned to their observation point, hoping to make sense of what they had seen. What they witnessed instead was something that shattered their beliefs even further. Enemy forces surged from the north, thousands of Kreth warriors, armored in black steel, their war cries shaking the ground. The Kreth were brutal conquerors, known for smashing disciplined armies into dust with sheer numbers. The aliens expected panic. Humans were fewer in number, outflanked, and exhausted after days of fighting. But panic never came. The first wave hit hard, plasma tearing through trenches, explosions throwing men into the air. Smoke rose, and screams echoed. Officers fell, communications broke, and by every law of war, the human lines should have collapsed. Yet they did not. From the chaos came the unexpected sound again. Doc's voice. Second squad, pivot left. Mortar crews, 3 clicks east. Fire now. Snipers, focus on the heavy gunners. The words were not shouted, but every soldier heard them. Orders rippled through the chaos like a current, and suddenly the line held. Soldiers scrambled into new positions, rifles flashing in deadly rhythm. Mortars roared, explosions ripped through Kreth ranks, and sniper fire cracked with brutal precision. The alien generals stared in disbelief. This was not the result of strict hierarchy. This was not soldiers blindly obeying ranks. This was soldiers moving with trust, fighting with loyalty that came from something far deeper. General Kor slammed his claw against the ground in frustration. This is madness. No army should move like this without proper command. General Velarn's feathers rustled, his sharp eyes never leaving the battlefield. "It is command," he said quietly, "but not the kind you know, not the kind we understand." Doc moved through the battlefield like a shadow, kneeling beside the wounded, patching their injuries with swift hands, then rising to direct the flow of war as if he could see every angle. A soldier with a bleeding arm refused to leave the line until Doc ordered him back. Another, terrified by the Kreth charge, steadied his shaking hands the moment Doc placed a palm on his shoulder and gave a single nod. Everywhere Doc walked, soldiers fought harder, stood taller, and refused to break. The aliens could not explain it. Was it magic? Some hidden human weapon? Or was it something simpler, something terrifying in its simplicity? General Theris, the insectoid, buzzed his mandibles nervously. They fight. Not for orders, not for medals, not for survival. They fight for him. For the medic. Velarn gave a slow nod. Loyalty to rank can be broken. Loyalty to fear can collapse. But loyalty to a man who bleeds with them, that is unshakable. The Kreth charge pressed harder, waves upon waves of black-armored warriors. The aliens expected the human line to collapse under sheer pressure. But once again, Doc's calm voice cut through the storm. Pull back 3 steps. Tighten the line. Focus fire center mass. Don't waste bullets. Steady, steady. Now. At his signal, rifles roared in perfect unison. The Kreth front line staggered, then broke. Their momentum shattered. The battlefield echoed with the thunder of human discipline. Discipline not born of orders, but of trust. The alien generals felt unease settle in their chests. They had seen powerful generals command armies. They had seen kings and queens order legions, but never had they seen a medic, a man meant only to heal, hold the power to shape war itself. And then came the moment that silenced even Kor. A Kreth war machine, a massive 4-legged beast of steel and plasma cannons, charged through the smoke, heading straight for the human lines. Soldiers froze. Heavy weapons crews were out of position. The beast's cannons glowed with deadly energy, ready to fire. Before anyone could move, Doc ran forward. Not away, not to hide, but forward. He shouted orders with a calm fury. "Rockets on me. Aim for the joints. Now." The soldiers obeyed without hesitation. Rockets streaked past him, slamming into the machine's legs. The beast stumbled but did not fall. Plasma fire lit the ground around Doc, but he never flinched. Again, hit the core. Now. More rockets flew, striking dead center. The war machine erupted in a ball of fire, collapsing into twisted metal. The battlefield shook with the blast. And through the flames, Doc walked back to his men, smoke curling around him, his armor blackened but his voice steady as ever. Back to positions. This fight isn't done. The alien generals stared in silence. Not one human questioned him. Not one hesitated. They followed without rank, without fear, without doubt. Velarn whispered words none of them wanted to hear. If this is the power of their medic, what will happen when their true generals arrive? The battlefield thundered again as the Kreth regrouped for another wave. But the aliens no longer laughed. They no longer mocked. For the first time, they looked at humanity not as a curious species with too many ranks, but as a force forged in loyalty, bound by something stronger than hierarchy. And at the center of it all was the man called Doc, the medic who commanded an army without ever needing a title. The council chamber of the Xoreth Dominion buzzed with tension. The war reports from Vera 9 had spread across every corner of the galaxy. Alien commanders who once laughed at humanity's complicated ranks now sat in uneasy silence. Holo displays flickered above the round table, showing battle recordings. Human soldiers moved in perfect rhythm, not under the booming voice of generals, but under the steady words of a medic. The aliens had no word for it. It defied their logic. General Kor slammed his claw against the table, his golden eyes flashing with anger. This is a trick. Humans plant false stories to make us fear them. A medic cannot command a battlefield. It is impossible. His words echoed through the chamber, but no one laughed with him. General Villarn, the feathered Averix, leaned forward, his sharp beak clicking as he spoke. I was there, Kor. I saw it with my own eyes. That man, this Doc, did not need a title. His soldiers obeyed him with a loyalty stronger than any chain of command. When officers fell, he stepped in, and they followed him as if he were the highest commander in their fleet. Kor scowled, his scales bristling. Then their army is working. It means their soldiers are undisciplined, swayed by emotions. An army must follow rank, not affection. From the far side of the chamber, General Ferris of the Rack, an insectoid whose mandibles clicked nervously, spoke in a low, uneasy tone. You do not understand. Their loyalty is not affection. It is not weakness. It is something else, something we cannot control. The chamber fell silent as Ferris continued. On Vera 9, I saw soldiers bleeding, broken, ready to fall. And yet, when Doc spoke, they stood again. They pushed forward with wounds that should have ended them. Their bond to him is beyond logic. It is not rank. It is not fear. It is trust earned in blood. Villarn nodded slowly. And that trust turns into power. The kind of power no insignia, no council, no empire can buy. Whispers spread through the chamber. Some leaders exchanged nervous glances, while others looked away, unwilling to admit the truth. Finally, an elder alien counselor, his body frail but his voice sharp as a blade, spoke. Tell me this, how can a single man hold such sway? Why do soldiers follow him? Why do officers step aside? Villarn's feathers rustled, his eyes narrowing, because he never asked to lead. He earned it. The words cut deep into the room, echoing long after he had finished. Kor slammed his claw again, desperate to hold onto his pride. This is dangerous. An army that follows one man instead of rank is unstable. If he falls, they will crumble. Ferris shook his head slowly, his mandibles clicking. No, that is what you failed to see. If he falls, they will fight harder. They will fight for him. Even in death, his voice will guide them. The chamber grew heavy with silence. None of the generals wanted to admit it, but deep in their hearts, they knew Ferris spoke the truth. The council leader finally broke the silence. His voice was low, almost feeble. Then what does this mean for the galaxy? If their medics can lead wars, what power do their generals hold? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Kor growled, his pride wounded, but even he could no longer laugh. If this is true, then humanity is more dangerous than we imagined. Villarn leaned back, his feathers trembling slightly. You still do not understand. Humanity's power does not come from their weapons, or their ships, or their generals. It comes from something else, something no empire can steal. Their power is born from trust, from bonds that cannot be broken. And then, with a voice that carried both awe and fear, Ferris whispered, if a medic can command an army, then perhaps humanity needs no generals at all. The council chamber fell into uneasy silence. Outside, the galaxy turned as it always did. unaware that a single human medic had shaken the confidence of its greatest powers. But deep inside the Council, doubt had taken root. And doubt was more dangerous than any weapon. The battlefield of Rigel 4 burned red. Alien ships had torn through the skies, pounding human defenses with merciless fire. The smell of smoke and plasma scorched the air. Soldiers stumbled across the ground, their uniforms torn, their bodies bruised. It should have been the end. The enemy commander, General Kor, stood tall on the ridge with his forces, claws gleaming under the burning sky. He roared in triumph. Humans are finished. Their lines break. Their leaders fall. And he was right. Human officers had been cut down one by one. The front line was collapsing, panic spreading like fire through dry grass. Alien forces surged forward, certain of their victory. But then, amid the chaos, came a sound. Not the sound of commands barked in authority. Not the booming of war drums. It was calm. It was steady. It was a voice the soldiers all knew. "Hold the line," Doc said, his voice carrying through the chaos. "You're not done yet. Not while they stand. Not while we stand." The soldiers turned their heads. There he was, blood on his sleeve, dirt on his face, but his eyes clear and unshaken. He wasn't shouting like a general. He wasn't waving a banner. He was simply there, steady, unbreakable. And the humans answered. One soldier gritted his teeth, pushing himself up despite his broken arm. Another reloaded her weapon, wiping tears from her eyes. A squad that had been retreating stopped in their tracks, turned, and began to fire back. Kor watched from the ridge, his golden eyes narrowing. No, this is not possible. The humans should have crumbled. Any other species would have. But instead, the broken line began to close. The tide shifted. Forward. Doc's voice rang out, calm but full of fire. Don't fight for the council. Don't fight for ranks. Fight for the ones next to you. Fight for those who can't. Alien forces hesitated. The humans weren't fighting like soldiers following orders. They were fighting like family protecting their own. Each step they took forward was heavier than 1,000 enemy strikes. A platoon of armored enemies charged, claws flashing and weapons raised. Human troops should have scattered, but they didn't. They met the charge head-on, roaring as they fought shoulder to shoulder. Cover the wounded, Doc shouted, diving to drag a bleeding soldier behind the line. With one hand he pressed bandages against the wound, with the other he pulled forward, pushed them back. And the humans did. Alien lines wavered. Their commanders screamed for order, but the momentum was gone. The humans, driven by something deeper than rank, fought with a fury that sent shivers down even the most hardened alien warriors' spines. General Kor snarled, throwing his troops forward. Crush that man. But every time his soldiers surged, the humans stood taller. A squad surrounded Doc, protecting him as he worked on the wounded. He gave no grand speeches, no complicated orders, only clear, steady words. Breathe, fight, hold. And somehow, those words carried more power than the banners of empires. The alien lines began to collapse. Soldiers who had laughed at the humans now trembled as their formation broke apart. Kor roared in fury. Why? Why do they fight harder for a medic than a general? General Theris, watching from the distant ridge, whispered the answer no one wanted to admit. Because he fights for them first, and they will never abandon him. The battle turned. Alien ships retreated, dragging their wounded away. Human soldiers, bloody but unbroken, stood victorious on the scorched ground of Rigel 4. Doc knelt beside a dying soldier, his hand steady as he whispered, "You did well. Rest now. We'll carry it from here." Around him, hundreds of soldiers stood silently, their hearts heavy but their spirits burning. On that day, the aliens learned a truth that shook them to their core. Human armies did not need ranks to rise. They only needed someone they trusted. And that trust was enough to break empires. The War Council of the Alien Coalition gathered in a dark chamber aboard their flagship. The air was thick with smoke from burning incense, meant to hide the stench of fear. General Kor slammed his clawed hand onto the obsidian table. The crack echoed across the chamber. "He humiliated us," Kor growled. "One man, a medic, turned an entire battlefield. Our troops folded because of his voice." Around the table, alien captains shifted uncomfortably. Some avoided his gaze, others nodded in silent agreement. "Not a general, not a strategist, a medic," another alien hissed. "If humans follow a man like that, how can we ever crush them?" The answer was simple. "We kill him," Kor said, his golden eyes burning. "Without their so-called doc, humans will lose their spirit. They will break like every other species before them." The room was silent, then filled with murmurs of approval. Plans formed quickly: silent assassins, poison in the night, hidden snipers. The council cared nothing for honor. They only wanted Doc erased. Far from that chamber, Doc sat under a flickering lantern in the human camp. His uniform was torn, his hands still stained with blood from the Battle of Rigel 4. Around him, soldiers rested on broken crates, their laughter tired but real. Doc wasn't speaking of strategy. He was telling a story, a simple one about a lost dog he had found as a child, one he refused to leave behind until it was safe. The soldiers listened, smiling softly, because in that story, they heard the same thing he had shown them in battle. No one gets left behind. But even as warmth spread through the camp, shadows moved at the edge of the night. The first attempt came quietly. A cloaked alien slipped past the perimeter guards, blades dripping with venom. The assassin crept closer, his movements silent as death. He raised his weapon, eyes locked on Doc's back. Then, "Not tonight," a voice growled. The assassin froze. A human soldier, battered but watchful, had been waiting in the dark, his rifle's muzzle pressed against the alien's skull. The camp lit up with alarms, soldiers surrounding the assassin within seconds. Doc looked up calmly as the alien was dragged forward. His eyes met the assassin's, not with anger, but with something colder: pity. "You came for me," Doc said quietly. "But you don't understand. I'm not the reason they fight." The assassin hissed in defiance, but deep inside, he felt the weight of truth in those words. The second attempt came days later. A sniper's shot rang across the battlefield, streaking toward Doc's chest. But before it could hit, another soldier threw himself into the line of fire, collapsing in Doc's arms. The camp was shaken, grief cutting deeper than any blade. Doc held the dying soldier, his hands firm on the wound even as he whispered, "You saved me, but I'll carry your strength forward. I promise." The men and women around him clenched their fists. Their grief hardened into steel. Instead of breaking their spirit, the attempt only bound them closer. The alien commanders watched from afar in disbelief. Every plan failed. Every strike against Doc only made humans fight harder. Still, the council was not finished. On the eve of the next battle, they unleashed their most desperate move, a full strike force aimed not at human armies, but at Doc himself. An entire squadron of alien warships descended from the skies, cannons locked on his position. Explosions ripped through the night, tearing apart the earth where Doc's field tent once stood. Fire consumed the camp. When the dust cleared, the aliens expected silence. Instead, they heard it, the sound that haunted them since Rigel 4. Calm, steady, unbreakable. Form ranks, protect each other. We live through this. Doc stood amid the fire, dust covering his face, but his voice unshaken. His soldiers moved instantly, like pieces of a living machine, protecting the wounded, returning fire, pushing the aliens back once again. The alien commander screamed in Among the aliens, whispers began. Even their own soldiers muttered the words that would soon terrify the council and everything else. If humans follow this Doc, then maybe he's more than just a medic. Maybe he's the reason they can't be broken. On that night, the Coalition realized a truth darker than death. Killing Doc would not destroy the humans. It would only turn him into a legend. The alien coalition had reached its limit. Every plan had failed. Every trap had broken. Every assassination attempt had only made humans stronger. And so, the council decided on their most desperate gamble, total war. They gathered their fleets, thousands of warships that blotted out the stars, their cannons glowing like the wrath of gods. On the barren world of Rigel Prime, the humans stood waiting. They were outnumbered 20 to 1. Their supply lines were stretched thin. Their ships were broken, their soldiers tired. By all logic, they should have surrendered. But they didn't, because Doc was there. He stood on the ruined ramparts of a fortress, overlooking the battlefield. His uniform was torn, his hair gray with ash, but his eyes were steady. Around him, soldiers waited in silence, their weapons trembling in their hands. Doc spoke quietly, almost gently. They think this is the end. That will break under the fire, but they don't understand. This isn't about America. It isn't about wars. This is about us. He looked at the men and followed him through fire and death. They'll throw everything at us today, and maybe we will all see tomorrow. But if this is the end, then let it be one we never forget. Let them remember the humans do not bow, that we fight for each other, even against the impossible. The silence broke. Soldiers who had been trembling straightened, weapons steadied, fear turned to fire, and then the sky fell. Alien warships unleashed their fury, raining fire down upon the fortress. The ground shook, the walls shattered. Columns of enemy troops surged forward, their armored bodies gleaming in the inferno. The humans met the battle. Doc wasn't shouting orders like a general. He was moving through the lines, pulling the wounded to safety, pressing bandages against bleeding wounds, whispering steady words. Breathe. Hold. Keep fighting. And somehow, those quiet words carried louder than the cannons. The aliens crashed against the human lines again and again. Every time they broke through, the humans pushed them back. Every time a soldier fell, another took their place. Protect each other, Doc shouted, dragging the wounded soldier out of the fire. Don't give them an inch. The coalition commanders watched in horror. By their numbers, the humans should have been wiped out in minutes. Instead, hours passed. The fortress still stood, and the humans still fought. One alien captain, his scales quivering with fear, whispered, This is not war. This is something else. They don't fight to win. They fight because they will not let go of each other. General Corps roared in frustration. Crush them. End this. The aliens unleashed their heaviest weapons. A massive plasma strike tore through the fortress, collapsing the central tower. Dust and fire swallowed everything. For a moment, silence reigned. The council leaned forward, certain it was over. But through the smoke, a voice rose. Steady, calm, unshaken. Stand up. They haven't won yet. Doc emerged from the rubble, one arm bleeding, his face bruised, but his voice clear. The humans, battered and broken, staggered to their feet around him. And then, something no one expected happened. The humans advanced. Not to defend, not to hold, but to push forward. Step by step, through fire and death, they charged into the enemy lines. Their war cry shook the battlefield. The aliens faltered. Soldiers who had mocked human ranks, who had called them weak, now saw something terrifying. Men and women who would not stop, who would not break, even when the world itself fell around them. The coalition fleets, shaken by panic, began to retreat. Ships pulled back. Commanders screamed for order, but it was too late. The humans had turned the impossible battle into a victory. When the dust settled, Rigel Prime still burned, but it was human banners that stood over the ruins. Doc sat on a broken wall, patching up a soldier's wounds. His hands were steady, his voice soft, his presence unshaken. The soldiers gathered around him, silent with respect. To them, he was no longer just Doc. He was the heart of their fight, the reason they stood when no one else could. And across the galaxy, whispers spread like wildfire. Not of generals, not of admirals, but of a medic, a man called Doc, who commanded without rank, who led without orders, who turned soldiers into legends. The aliens had mocked human ranks. Now, they feared the one man who needed none.